Hey there, this is Natalie, and I'm taking a break from analysis type stuff today to talk about some hot takes from the internet, just for a bit of a change. I want to talk about something that rears its head all the time, and which I felt like bringing up because of some tweets doing the rounds, but which is a topic that never seems to go away. The character people are going on about changes every season, but the laborious nonsense on Twitter is as predictable as the tide. The current iteration of the nonsense is about Nezuko from Demon Slayer, but I could have made more or less the exact same video about hot takes about Comey from Comey-san Can't Communicate last season, or Ilalu from Dragon Maid the season before that, and so it goes on. So, what are the takes in question? Well, in Demon Slayer, Nezuko, who was always depicted as a childlike character previously, but who has the ability to change her size because she's a demon, was shown to adopt an adult form in a scene in the currently airing new season. Where this was a transformation rather than her just aging over the course of the story, her usual kimono outfit became smaller on her and therefore more revealing. And because her adult form is an adult woman, she's drawn to have a generously sized pair of the devil's melons. Some people commented that this was a glow-up for Nezuko, and that they found her adult form attractive. It also seems like she was drawn this way with the intention of having an appealing design that sets apart what she's like when she's in this form from what she usually looks like. But apparently, none of that is Daijobu. And the people who liked how the fictional girl with demon powers looked once she had adult physical features are sus. And the mangaka who originally designed the character, who's a woman by the way, must be condemned, and all because Nezuko is canonically only 15. I've not only seen people predictably pointing out Nezuko's canon age, at anyone even joking about thinking she looks hot, as if to imply that them liking how she looks means they probably shouldn't be allowed around children, but also some clowns calling someone a paedophile for liking adult Nezuko's design, even after he pointed out that he was also 15. So basically saying teenagers shouldn't be allowed to be attracted to people their own age now. Nope, sorry kid, MILFs only or you're a menace. Now, some people probably mean well with this nonsense. I do want to at least give some of this contingent the benefit of the doubt, and assume it's just a very naive and ill-advised attempt to protect real-life children and teens from people who actually are paedophiles. I also think a lot of the people who go off on Twitter about anime like this are actually just looking for clout, or trying perhaps a little too hard to virtue signal about how morally righteous they are. You know, for basing whether or not they like the look of a drawing on the arbitrary number the author came up with for the character's age. But I'm sure some of them genuinely do care about issues like real-world child abuse, and therefore just have this ingrained reaction to anything that seems like it involves adults sexualizing people under 18. But even the people who mean well somehow are getting things really mixed up here, if they're shocked by Big Nezuko having some cleavage, or are calling teenagers who are attracted to people their own age, fictional or real, paedophiles. I can at least understand why some people are against lolly characters, that is, characters specifically designed to look like young children, regardless of their canon age. But what we're talking about when it's Nezuko, Comey, Nagatoro, or basically any character depicted as being around high school age, is not even lollies. Lolly is not a term for anyone below the magical age of 18. In fact, many lollies are fantasy characters that are hundreds of years old, like say Beatrice from ReZero. Lollies are also not always in any way sexualized, and can just be designed to be cute or pretty in a doll-like kind of way. This is something Beatrice would also be an example of, where she's never a love interest for any other characters, and is always depicted in an elaborate, non-revealing outfit. So even if you find sexy lollies completely objectionable, it's still worth understanding the terms you're talking about, rather than just equating what's really just a type of character design which can be used in a lot of different ways, with some kind of deviant tendencies on the part of the author or the fans. But unless intentionally designed to look like one, a high school girl character would not normally be a lolly in terms of how the word is actually used. I know some people have this weird idea that on our 18th birthdays, we girls all magically transform from scrawny, flat-chested children, interested only in homework and pony stickers, into mature women with curves, and an interest in what other people keep in their pants. But I genuinely don't understand if those people have just forgotten their own adolescence, or just would rather pretend that it didn't happen because it shames the baby Jesus or something. See, the difference between a lolly and a character like Comey or even say Uzaki, Comey being what would be called in anime archetypes a bishoujo, or literally beautiful girl, and Uzaki being what's jauntily known around the world as a short stack, or short girl who is stacked, is just a character design take on the difference between a child and someone who's at least physically speaking an adult. And that difference is puberty. I know I sound like some kind of school nurse here, but puberty, generally speaking, happens to girls younger than it does to boys, and most of us are done with it long before we're 18. Teenage girls can be tall and have boobs. Trust me, I'm 6 foot tall and a double D, and that didn't happen overnight once I was allowed to vote. Puberty is when you become biologically capable of reproducing, and your body is that of an adult. Because sexual attraction is tied to reproduction, even if reproduction is not always the goal of attraction, it's natural that most people start to experience sexual attraction themselves when they go through puberty. And it's also the natural way of things for humans to be exclusively sexually attracted to other people who have also gone through puberty. Our natural instinct around people who have not, that is to say children, is to protect them. That's why the characteristics associated with physical maturity, like breasts, are considered attractive at all. But it's also why paedophilia is an unnatural thing most people feel an innate disgust towards. Yes, paedophilia is also very harmful to people, but that's the reason we tend to be morally against it and why it's illegal. We also tend to be morally against other things that harm people, like stealing, but those don't bring out the same feeling of disgust we get from something we see as unnatural, like attraction to children. Consider we feel the same disgust towards, say, necrophilia, which technically isn't going to ruin anybody's life, but which we still feel revulsion towards because it goes against what we consider natural. Research into it doesn't yet reveal exactly why some people are paedophiles, or whether there's a reliable means for rehabilitation, but we do know what a paedophile is. And I'm not talking about things like laws around it, which vary from country to country, but about what fundamentally defines a paedophile, and that is, they are specifically, and often exclusively, attracted to children. The question of minors or not minors is not a consideration here, because it's not the number on someone's birth certificate that a paedophile is interested in, it's that they're physically a child, i.e. they do not have the adult physical characteristics of someone who has been through puberty. Now, in human societies, we've generally decided that life is a bit too complicated for people to be considered adults as soon as they're biologically old enough to get pregnant. We also know that the brain isn't fully mature in terms of decision-making and risk management, even until around the mid-20s. So we generally consider that it's morally wrong for older people to pursue relationships with teenagers, and that teenagers shouldn't rush into becoming sexually active. Laws exist around things like age of consent to protect teenagers because they're vulnerable as young adults, being new to adult things, not because they're literally children. But just because it would be predatory and morally wrong for someone in, say, their 20s or 30s to actually try to have a relationship with a teenager, that doesn't mean it's paedophilic if they just find the physical look of someone who has gone through puberty attractive. It just isn't, especially when that person is a drawing, so all there even is to them is what they look like, and you couldn't hurt them at all. Yes, it might be distasteful to make lewd comments about them, But thinking nice booba when you see an anime girl doesn't make you a paedophile. Paedophiles don't like booba. With that in mind, if the people who are so offended by fictional lollies get to go on about how characters like Kanna from Dragon Maid are child-coded, so it doesn't matter what their canonical ages are, then surely they have to accept the reverse too. A character who's clearly designed to have gone through puberty, in the case of a female character by having a womanly body shape, or in the case of male characters by being drawn as more filled out, or having other physical characteristics that come with male maturity, like facial hair, could be regarded as adult-coded, regardless of their canonical age. So Arnos Voldegord, who's like canonically only a week old or something at the start of the Misfit of Demon King Academy, is not a Shota, for example, and it's not weird that his classmates find him attractive. In Demon Slayer then, Nezuko in her adult form is by definition adult-coded. That's the whole point of her having different forms, as is the case with a character like Jahi from the great Jahi Will Not Be Defeated, who switches between a cute lolly form and a far more sexily designed adult form, but whose actual age isn't really relevant because she's not human. Now, don't get me wrong, I think the coding thing in general doesn't stand up to a huge amount of scrutiny, given we're dealing with stylized art, and a lot of design decisions are just whatever the creator thinks looks cool or appealing or fits with the character's personality. But I think it's still clear in general that you don't typically draw boobs, big muscles or beards on characters who are supposed to look like cute little children. Nobody trying to design a lolly would design something that looks like Comey, who's tall, slender and busty, or Ilalu with her massive fire sacs. It's worth pointing out too that someone like Comey is not a particularly fan-servicey, sexualized character in the work itself anyway. She's in turns either beautiful or cute, depending on the intention of how she's appearing in a scene. So any ways people are reimagining her are just because that's something they want to draw or see themselves, not because the show presents her in that way. If a character looks like an adult, then people just tend to ignore their canonical age when it comes to things like drawing the cultured fan art or whatever. Comey or Big Nezuko, in the way they're drawn, wouldn't look any different at 18 or 21, so I generally think people looking at or drawing that kind of thing aren't thinking about her age, just her design. The fact that a lot of the time when people are pointing out that characters are under 18, they accompany their scolding with a picture from the wiki for whatever show showing their age, kind of demonstrates that half the time the people watching these shows don't even know exactly how old the characters are supposed to be. It's just not really important compared with their designs. Take one of the characters with a ton of fan art drawn of her, Rem. Rem is 17 at the start of ReZero, but when people want to draw her, they're not really concerned with pointing out, this is Rem, but like at the point in the story where she's already turned 18, that part is very important. No, they just draw what they like and probably give no thought whatsoever to any of that stuff. Her design doesn't change when she turns 18 after all. The characters look like adults, and they aren't real, so to a normal person, it's not necessary to devote even the second of thought to specifying that she's 18 in a picture, or even to finding out exactly how old she's supposed to be at all, before deciding whether they think her design is appealing or not. I just find it strange that anyone can fail to notice the things in the way a character looks that clearly belong to someone who's physically mature. Like the massive swinging bajingas on Ilalu, who's canonically the same age as Toru, but who's also apparently somehow child-coded because she's short, I guess. Or Uzaki, who's at college and whose 20th birthday is literally an episode of the show, and whose most memorable physical feature, aside from having a fang the same colour as her skin, is again Oppai, but who is also somehow a controversial child-coded design. It seems like people are just reaching for something to kick off at other people for creating or liking. I get that some people are uncomfortable with lollies, but for some reason the logical step for some of those people is to go off about characters, fans, creators, the country of Japan, and so on. And I have to wonder if once you get into that mindset, you just start looking for hints of lolly to go off about in every series or anime image that you see, just for that dopamine rush of shaming some random person on Twitter, or asserting the moral superiority of the West, which brought us toddler pageants and cuties, over Japan. But there's another point to all of this too. No matter where you stand on lollies and shotas, you have to remember that the primary target audience for most of the anime and manga that people make complaints about teenage characters in is people around the same age as the characters. Demon Slayer is shonen, which is literally the category of Japanese media aimed primarily at teenage boys. Another hint at the target audience the stuff you're watching was written for is the amount of popular anime that's set in a high school, whether it's a fantasy setting like Jujutsu Kaisen or a contemporary one like Comey. Older people like the stories and characters too, but that's an advantage of writing for teenagers, because by definition, older people have all been teenagers and been through school, and so they can still relate to the stuff in the shows and understand the dynamics between the characters. But the story can also be adult enough to not feel like a kid's show. But even so, to the creators, we're just a bonus audience for the shows. The primary audience they're written and designed to be most interesting to is teens, Japanese teens. If that's the primary audience, then the characters that are canonically supposed to be attractive need to be drawn in a way that that audience will see as attractive. So creating a teenage character that's supposed to be attractive to teenagers is really all that's happening here. And honestly, a lot of the people who do talk about these characters in Western anime fan communities literally are the same age as them too. I've talked about physical adulthood already, but emotional adulthood is also something we need to consider. Everybody knows that being an adult isn't an instant switch, but a process. And everybody knows the concept of a young adult, that phase of life where you're very interested in the things associated with adulthood, but you're inexperienced and new to it all. But in American media, you still see this take of calling people literal children if they're under 18, as if none of that is the case. I get that when people say this, their priority is protecting people under 18, which is obviously a good intention to have, but it's still lacking the nuance that we very much want to be there when it comes to handling that period of life in fictional stories. That might be why I find the way Japanese media approaches teenage characters more acceptable than American viewers do. Because to me, well, of course half the jokes in Nagatoro are about how awkward they are about sex. That's what being a teenager is like. That's what teenagers find funny because it's the same stuff they joke about. And it's what older people find funny because everyone's been there. I honestly think the Japanese approach shows adults trying to genuinely create stuff teenagers will be interested in, rather than sanitizing it to conform to what they think teenagers should be like, but which they know they weren't like themselves, which is the feel I get from American teen shows. And to be honest, even when I see adult men talk about high school characters like Comey or Nagatoro, it's more in a way like, I wish I'd known a girl like that when I was at school, than that they want to hang around outside of school perving on all the 15-year-old girls. Some people enjoy stuff that takes them back to their own high school days, maybe remembering the fun stuff, or maybe imagining how it could have been different. And sometimes that's all it is. Sure, occasionally when you think the worst of everyone, you'll be right, and they actually do want to groom teenagers. But I think it's always worth considering that most people aren't actually sketchy, and that liking a made-up character for entertainment is normally just that. Still, if it still makes you uncomfortable that people like how big Nezuko looks, then there's nothing I can say that will make you feel any more comfortable with it. Everyone has their own reasons why they don't like certain things, and often they're not things that can be dispelled rationally. But I did still want to kind of attempt to explain that there are reasons these characters exist, and why people like them, that don't have anything sinister behind them, that it's not a sign that the author or artist is some kind of degenerate if they create a good-looking teenage character, that it's not cause for concern if someone else likes that character design, and also that you're probably misusing the word lolly. If you hate lollies, that's your take on it, but before raging against lollies and branding people lollicons, it's best if you actually know what those things are. Still, that's my take on the topic, but what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. I know this video is a bit different from my usual content, but sometimes I like to talk about broader stuff from the anime community, as well as talking more specifically about series and stories, and I feel like this was an interesting thing to talk about. I hope you found it interesting, but if you didn't, I'll be back very soon with more of my usual anime and light novel analysis type stuff. Thanks as always to my supporters on Patreon, and to everyone who helps me out by subscribing to my channel and watching my videos. Thanks for watching this one, and I hope to see you again very soon.